Hello, friends, and welcome to the Urantia Book Fellowship's monthly live streaming interview. Uh, Lately, we've been featuring our second miler grant recipients, and I'm really looking forward to today's interview because Mr. Michael McIsaac is with us today exclusively, and he's going to be talking to us about his wonderful research on famous Urantia Book readers and the influence that they've had on our popular culture. And it's bound to be an interview full of surprises and interesting information. Michael, you're a fount of information about this. You've been so dedicated to this project, gosh, as for at least 10 years that I know of, and you and I have talked about it endlessly. So welcome to the show, Michael McIsaac. I'm so glad to see you today. I've been looking forward to this interview. And how are you doing? It's great to see you.
Thank you, Paula, and thank you for all the great tips and ideas. And oh, you should talk to that person. Did you talk to Don Green yet? And so forth. It's been hugely helpful. It's been
You hear a lot over the years, when you've been hanging around in the movement for 45 years, you hear a lot about what's
yeah.
going
You
on.
have the privilege of kind of being in the middle of
Right.
a lot that's going on, and going to these whole life expos and things like that, and meeting the authors and so
Yeah.
forth.
Well, I have to say, you've surprised me. You've been able to unearth some amazing artists and people, famous people who read the Urantia book that I never heard of. And so it's just great to find out about that. And it's not only musicians, it's authors and actors. And of course, we know lots of ministers. There's the sung and the unsung, and so it's really fun to find out about this. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know your mom and dad both read the Urantia book, and so they've been big influences in your life. And you grew up with the teachings. You grew up in Hawaii, right? Tell us a little bit of your background.
Um, yeah, I was first I lived before we moved to Hawaii in Pittsburgh, and we we had study groups with the Busellis. So there was a point at which there are some photographs taken where we had thought adjuster parties, and you can see that
Oh,
we had pendants with the three circles, and when we were kids. Um, so my parents were part of a study group in the Pittsburgh area, um, and then yeah, when we moved to Hawaii, I have a lot of fond memories of being part of that Urantia community, both on Maui and the Big Island, because my mom lives on Maui and my dad on the Big Island. On the Big Island, there was quite a phenomenon of many readers who bought land adjacent to each other on a hill. They call it the hill, and a lot of them had children that were around my age, so
wow.
they would have like events sometimes when there might be 30 kids there or something. And so yeah, being a second generation reader has been yeah, I've never discovered it. It's always been part of my life. And then when I was 16, um, the Hawaii schools had a lot of problems and things, and so we decided to have me try going to a Christian school. And my dad says, "Well, that was a great decision because it really interested me." And when they would tell me things, I'd be like, "I don't agree with this," and my dad'd be like, "Why don't you read this page from the Urantia book, Christianity's Problem?" And I'd be like, "Wow, yeah, this makes a lot of sense." And then so it was when I was in high school, when I was 16, that I started reading the Urantia book, and I decided I got to read this whole book and really get into it. And then um, yeah, I really loved going to the conferences.
Mm.
You don't hear a lot of maybe unusual big vocabulary when you grow up in Hawaii. It's kind of a relaxed culture. There's not as much focus on education as if I'd grown up in Massachusetts or something maybe. But you go to these conferences and be like, wow, man, these people are so smart and they're so cool and they're so friendly. And these study groups. Um, yeah, and then as I'm sure you're familiar with, when I started going to ranch conferences, it was also kind of this thing where there weren't many young readers. It's mostly been there's been this large amount of people of the baby boomer generation. So I got really, really enthusiastic about that for a lot of years, of feeling like, well, I needed to find and connect with other readers of my generation. In a lot of cases, it was maybe people who were also second generation who were just like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to read the Urantia book or not. I'm open to it. And then when they met peers who were on fire with it, then a lot of them, it tended to turn them on to it to various extents. But that was a big, probably, to a great extent, the main focus of my life for a lot of my 20s. And then
I remember that. I remember
yeah,
you did
I would
that.
travel a lot and just really try to do everything I could to find and connect with readers of all ages, and with a special focus on people who were of my generation.
Right.
Yeah, and then my work with this research began when I was at Stockholm University. 2004, my supervisor said I was going to write my bachelor's thesis and then also had to write a master's thesis, and they kind of ended up being the same. I just kind of added on to my bachelor's thesis. And my supervisor just wouldn't take no for an answer that I had to write about Urantia, because I told him, my background and everything. And he was like, nobody's written about this. It's amazing. Like, how can, because he kind of just thought, well, maybe nobody's really reading it if nobody's written about it. So it's interesting how it's really kind of flown under the radar of people like him. And he's really, really interested in new religious movements, as they call them. It has a, the word cult has a negative connotation, of course. And so academics who don't want to be associated with that stigma use the term new religious movements, but he's a real expert on them and really passionate about studying them. And so he kind of also, I was like, oh no, I'm going to get so into it, I'm not going to be able to stop, and that's exactly what happened. I spent years, I was only supposed to spend a couple terms, maybe 1 year, and I ended up spending maybe 4, and handing in this giant manuscript, and they all said, now you have to, all along, he said, well, this is going to be a great manuscript. You're going to have to publish it because it's needed. People like myself, he would say, if I have a student who says, I want to write a paper about Urantia, I need to be able to give them your book and say, well, start here. This is a great source, and so that's kind of been in the back of my mind. And then that research kind of just got me into, well, it didn't really start with famous readers, but I just thought it was so interesting because, growing up, and you just think, well, basically nobody knows about this book. It's like a unintentional secret in a way. And then to find out that, even just finding out that a few people who are really well known have been reading it is just kind of, wow, the juxtaposition. It's like that quote that you said, it's really amazing to think how much influence the revelation is having on popular culture, unbeknownst even to those with whom it's popular.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that just caught me. And then I thought, well, I'll just shine a light everywhere I can and see what I find. And then I'll be done with it soon, because there can't be that much. And then I keep shining a light and keep finding more. And so it's kind
One
of
thing leads to another, right?
Yeah.
It just has been exponential for you, and I've seen you go through this.
Yeah.
And it's really cool though to have been a part of it and to have watched you as you did this research. And what strikes me as you talked about what you did in your 20s, you were a fisher of men back then, right? You were looking for second generation Urantians, and you galvanized them and brought them together. And you really made a concerted effort to do that. And now you're a fisher of men of a different sort, men and women who are influential, who have had great influence with, popular culture, and have actually read the Urantia book and incorporated its message into what they were saying, unbeknownst to anybody. And I think it goes even beyond like celebrity. It goes to the church congregation level. There's many, many ministers. In fact, I think that if you are a spiritual seeker, a sincere spiritual seeker, you will find the Urantia book. You will find it. It's just not a matter of if, but when. And so, and I've met Anglican bishops, I've met monks who studied it at the Vatican. So many people that you would never dream have found it, read it, and incorporated into their lives. And they don't necessarily admit to anyone that they read it. And you can understand why they don't, because it would tend to be controversial in many ways. So,
Yeah, particularly if you're the Pope or something like that.
oh yeah.
I think
It's rumored that. Are you there, Mike? Did we lose you? Oh, it looks like Mike got frozen.
Did it come back?
Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
A live broadcast, friends. That's the way it is.
That's something that I've thought a lot about. Sometimes when I've communicated with famous people, they've kind of brought this up, that I'll ask, like, well, is there a reason that you've kind of been quite private about it? And they'll say, well, it's a concern. And I think particularly when it comes to, if you are a church leader or something, that's pretty obvious. But I think when it comes to, say, musicians, for example, that the society really kind of loves them regardless of their spiritual belief. I think
that's true. They love their job.
Also, yeah. There are also things like that. It's in the academic genre, the work that I've been doing. So it's not something that would be like sensationalized or exaggerating. So it's like still someone's personal spiritual life is still personal, if a person, has read the Urantia book at some time in their life and shown that, it doesn't mean that you're branding them as like, you agree with every single word in the book, and therefore you're this and you're that, and you're in a cult or whatever that, whatever negativity people imagine. But I've also, and you can see examples too of like Norman Lear and Carlos Santana, who have written about the Urantia book in their autobiographies. And the world hasn't really reacted at all. I mean, they're just kind of, Oprah asked Norman Lear, oh yeah, you read, and he, him and Lynn Lear kind of bonded over the Urantia book and would read it together. He's not as much of a reader, he's not as strong of a reader, but there, and also that the baby boomers, who many of these people are aging, and probably at some point it's like, well, is that really important that I should be worried what people are going to think of me that I read the Urantia book? Maybe when you're in your 50s or something, but if you're like 80 years old or something, are you really going to worry about that? Or maybe you'll be happy when you get to the mansion worlds that you weren't completely in the closet about it, but of course it's kind of a balance, I think, that a lot of musicians strike that I think is wise, because if you're too forward about something, then that's maybe not what the angels are intending or whatever. I don't know. It's up to each individual, really. But like I spoke with, I had a really great talk with a Dutch pianist who's had a huge amount of success, Hep Beving, and he talked about this, that he's like very intentionally planted the seeds. Like one of his most famous pieces is called Midware, and it's had like so many views and listens, and it's and he actually, it was really great that when I got to connect with him, he I was the first Urantia book reader he's ever talked to, and he just kind of discovered it through noticing 1111 and being like, I got to figure out why do I keep seeing 1111, and then pretty soon he stumbled upon the websites that talk about the Urantia book, and but still very much a new reader, but he feels like, well, this is something that's from God and that is important to stay connected with, and to kind of put the little hints out there, but in a very conscious way, not to sort of talk about it too much as he felt. But I guess it's up to each individual. I'm not going to judge anybody if they decide they want to be private about it. But also another factor that I think people, if they look at my research, is that it's one thing if you kind of single one person out. You say, guess what? If you were Paula, if you were famous, guess what? Paula Thompson, it works for Urantia Fellowship and she's part of this cult or whatever, But when you have like over 100 people who are all like way more famous than you are, in this list, and who are like the coolest people in the eyes of society to a great extent, people like, Jimi Hendrix and so forth.
Carlos Santana.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like you're being actually put in a category in a way of people that are really, really amazing. It becomes like, and that's kind of part of what I think is an important aspect of this research, is like when you look at it in its entirety, kind of like in a similar way that
I see that
the Urantia book is what is really mind blowing, or when you see its completeness, if you just take a page and say, wow, look at this, it's like, well, it's a page of writing, but when you look at the whole woven, as Jay Peregrine once called it, a symphony of themes,
Right.
a masterpiece, symphony of themes, then it's like, this is, nobody's ever, presented a worldview or a universe perspective anywhere near this
Right.
level of layer upon layer and beautiful. And
Well, we know, it's interesting to me that we do hesitate to talk about the Urantia book. And I think over the years, we've realized that there is a controversial side to it, that people can pick up on things like any great work and take things out of context and use that against it. And but really, when you think about it, it's the greatest news that's ever been given humanity. The news that God is not mad at us, the news that we are not alone, the news that we're part of a cosmic family, a universal family, part of a cosmos, a universe that's well ordered, that we have all of this wonderful celestial help at any time we need it. We have angels and midwayers and many celestial big brothers and sisters in the universe who love us and want to help us. I mean, this is really, it's good news. It's the best news. If anything, I think people would say, oh, well, this is too good to be true. And yet when you read it, you think, yes, it must be so, because it resonates so deeply, this good news that it's bringing. And if this isn't a revelation, then I'd love to see a real, but I know that I know in my heart from having studied it all these years that it's the best possible news. And yeah, I get why famous people like our old friend Mo Siegel, I get why he wouldn't want, for a good long while, he couldn't afford to be associated with it. Why? Because thousands of people were employed by him. And were there to be a boycott or something? And, anytime something goes against dogma or doctrine, it's going to be, it's going to be a lightning rod for controversy and conflict and whatever. And I don't blame them for wanting to avoid that. But I do also feel that there will come a time when influential people like Carlos Santana openly admit that he reads it and he's fine with it. It's moved him. It's changed his life, just like it has yours, just like it has mine. And, so it's really the best possible news. And what's interesting about the idea of cult, I know there's a lot of negative connotations around that. But really, when you think about it, how many books do you have on your shelf where it ever occurs to you to write the publisher to see who else reads it? But that is literally how we found each other. We weren't, nobody came out and twisted our arm. We literally read this book. It changed our lives. We wrote the publisher or called the publisher and said, I have to know who else is reading this thing, because this thing is changing my life.
Yeah, and some people can be, there's a whole spectrum of how positive or negative people are about the Urantia community. But for me, I just love Urantia book readers, and I've always just loved, I just love going to conferences. When I go to Urantia conference, my main concern is it's literally like, oh my God, I'm gonna, like, this lunch hour, how can I connect with as many people as possible? Because this is an opportunity. Maybe I won't have the opportunity to see these people, but it's like, it's so rare that we get to be together. And and when I was a teenager and started reading the Urantia book, that quote about if each day or if each week you can learn to love one more human being, it's like that part of myself gets on overdrive, or gets turbocharged when I'm in the Urantia community, because I just love Urantia book readers, and I know that they also share these teachings, and so in a sense, it's almost like a thing that I have to be careful about when I'm researching these people, because I love them too. I mean, they're such lovely people, and that I can, you could literally write 100 books, because they all deserve, if
could
you
write
really
a book
want to do
each.
justice to someone's amazing life, they would deserve like a full-length book.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and even a book doesn't really do justice. I mean, nothing does justice, but
So you literally have found hundreds of famous people who read the Urantia
yeah,
book.
in some cases, like, I didn't know a lot of celebrities, so in a lot of cases, like, I didn't really know who they were, and then but you did, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
like, a lot of times someone's a household name among the boomer generation, which is something that I bring up in this GoFundMe that I've recently started, and in other places that, that's kind of part of the reason that I found a sense of urgency lately is it was actually at a conference a few years ago at a summer study session that you asked me, if we could support you to do anything, what would you do? And I was like, goodness, I need to finish my book. This is like at the pace, I mean, working full time as a teacher and raising children, and just trying to squeeze this in. It was not, and then, then it kind of percolated, this idea, but, and then noticing how a lot of times the baby boomers, I mean, they're not going to be around forever, and they're
Right.
the ones who, in many cases, they experienced they're the Woodstock generation, and so many of these Woodstock musicians were Urantia Book readers, and of that generation, people who are so well known in your generation and that you'll so much better appreciate. And then not to mention all the Urantia Book readers that I love, who it would just be, really fun for them to be able to not miss out on that, and to be able to
Right.
be able to share it with them.
So what's your favorite, and you and I have talked about many, especially musicians and authors over the years, but what's your favorite recent one that you've discovered lately?
Well, I mentioned Hep Beving, and I mean, I don't know, I'm not maybe very good at picking favorites. You know, in there was recently these other ones that I haven't gotten to look into very much, but I was very amazed about, where there are several Latin American ones, one of which has actually talked about the Urantia Book on national television in Brazil.
Wow.
And she's a very well known, successful musician who's of your generation, so she's been successful for many decades. And so there's so many, always, like, it's always such a amazing thing to find out about these new ones. But a cool thing about the Dutch pianist I was talking about is that he kind of, I think of us as similar in a way, because he's actually quite a bit taller than me. I'm like 6'6", and he's maybe 6'9" or something. I don't know, but he's over 2 meters. In Europe,
Oh my goodness.
people talk in meters, and he's like 2 meters, 2.3 meter, or 2 meters, 203 centimeters or something. And he just towers, and then he's got this giant beard, and we're also like the same age, and both raising children, and then that we got to have this amazing. It was so cool when I wrote him. It was actually that Pato Bantan had organized that thing where he was going to highlight artists, and Emilio asked me, or not Emilio, Antonio asked me, could you be in it? But then he ended up not needing me to be in it anyway. But I thought, I should talk about this musician. So then I wrote him and said, there's this thing, I'd like to just interview you. And he wrote me back, I've been waiting to hear from you, or something like that.
That
But
is
he
so
meant to
cool.
kind of winked, but he meant, that he's never
So
talked to
you were gonna,
anybody about the Urantia Book in his entire life. And so he actually had a lot of questions for me. But what's also really cool about him is that he wasn't really pursuing a career in music. He was actually working in advertising. And then he felt this music, like he had kind of a spiritual experience. And he says that he doesn't really write his music. He feels like it just comes through him. So maybe he is one of these, celestial artisan kind of examples. Who knows? But, it's maybe not healthy for one's ego to think along those lines. But I actually sent him that quote, and he's not that familiar with the book. So he was like, oh, thanks for sending me that quote. I hadn't read it before, about the celestial artisans. But so he said he had this spiritual experience, and the music was just coming through him. And then he recorded it, and then it went viral. When he put it on Spotify, it just, people would say, like, you play it, you're like in a bar or something, you play it and it changes the room. And it touches a lot of people's emotions. So a lot of people, it makes them cry. He was at some kind of advertising conference. He played one of his pieces, and then he saw these tears on people's faces. They're kind of, it's hard to describe, because I'm not like an expert on music, but all the people who I know who really know music well are really impressed by his unique music. And so that's just so cool that it's like the quality of his music. He wasn't pushing or anything. Kind of like it is with Urantia Book readers, the Urantia. Actually, that's something he said about the Urantia Book that he likes, is it's not saying, hey, come read me. It's just there. And if you're a seeker, you can seek it out, but it's not like people are knocking on your door saying, you got to read this book. That's something my dad said too, when he originally found the Urantia Book, that he he was impressed that there wasn't like a glossy, marketing scheme or something like that. It was just,
Something real slick.
yeah, like a lot of maybe people do or groups do. So he
Mhm.
kind of noticed that contrast.
Seekers will find it. That's the point. Before we went on the air, you were sharing a little bit about Wavy Gravy and Woodstock. Do you want to share that story? Because that's really a cool story. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, when I was working on this GoFundMe, I thought maybe I should share, and maybe I should put it there or just email it to whoever's interested. Um, that I thought, oh, what should I share if I were to share an example? And I thought about his, because I've just, yeah, it's just he's just such a special person. And he's one of those people I barely knew who he was. There's a Ben and Jerry's flavor named after him and stuff like that, and he's like a hippie icon, but I didn't really know what he was famous for. But I mean, he's done so many things. He actually roomed with in New York in the early days when like folk music was just coming out, and Buffy St. Marie was there, and he roomed with Bob Dylan, and then he traveled with the Merry Pranksters after that, and he was like this performer, and then he traveled with the Merry Pranksters and Ken Kesey and those guys, and
Wow.
and then he ended up becoming like the sort of unofficial leader of the Hog Farm, which were like this commune, but unlike a lot of others that become, the leader ends up being a narcissist and manipulative and sort of manipulating and abusing people and so forth. He was just this,
Sweet.
I'm sure he has his faults, but he's just this loving hippie guy, and and he's so heroic in so many ways. So he managed at one point. Charles Manson actually came to the hog farm and tried to take it over. I mean, because of course that's what happens. A lot of times you'll have a commune and everything's going well, but so that he managed to kind of keep the hog farm from getting corrupted, and then they became like this traveling group, and they got famous for being able to be like security lovingly. So as opposed to hiring like big muscle men, they would lovingly he had like an amazing gift at doing that, and so then they got invited to come to Woodstock, and they were like the security at Woodstock, and they called themselves the police force as opposed to the police force, and that they would use humor and they would like lovingly get people to cooperate and stop conflicts and things like that. And then they also fed people. They took care of people who had bad acid trips,
Right.
and they were the security force. And then at the point where the governor of New York declared Woodstock a national a disaster area because there was all this rain and 400,000 people had shown up, and they'd only planned for a much smaller amount of people. So then he's on stage and he says, in every disaster area, there's always a little bit of heaven. We must be in heaven, man. And that's kind of what made him famous. Was he was kind of a master of ceremonies at Woodstock. And then he said, what we have in mind, it was the morning after all this rain and everybody's in the mud. And he says, what we have in mind is breakfast in bed for 400,000. And then they literally, somehow they fed, I don't know how they did it, but they, the hog farm basically were the leaders in organizing all these things. And so it's really amazing to think that, Woodstock was such an important event. And imagine if it hadn't gone as well as it did, if there had been violence or if there had been, and not long after, there was this big festival, which was kind of supposed to be like the West Coast Woodstock, and they hired bikers and they ended up like killing someone, right? So, and it was like they basically, the whole thing got ruined from the violence. And
The Hells
so,
Angels.
yeah. And so you can almost, it almost struck me that, wow, he could be a reservist for all I mean, that he, or in this particular, that he's done such a good job. And his wife, of course, has also had a huge, positive impact. And now he's still, that's the whole Woodstock thing is just the beginning, but he's also done so much humanitarian work. They've been giving sight to millions of blind people, and started in Nepal. They went on this like humanitarian mission, and he, and then a cool thing about the story is that my mom knew I had been researching him, that he was a Urantia Book reader. And then they do benefit concerts for the Seva organization, and Seva is the word for kindness, I think, in Sanskrit or something similar. And he has all these great expressions like "put your good where it does the most," and so he ends up sitting next to my mom, and she knows that I'm researching her, but then she's a little bit too shy to just ask him straight out, "Oh, my son tells me you read the Urantia book or something." So then but then finally she sees a guy and she thinks, "Oh, I'll bring up the Urantia." She tells this guy who's passing by, "Hey, did I meet you at a Urantia book study group?" Just to bring it up in front of Wavy. I guess she was too scared to strike up a conversation with him. And then he told her, "Oh, the Urantia book. I used to like to take it out to the desert and let the wind blow the pages and then read wherever it landed." And he just like starts telling her these stories about how, I mean, it's clearly been one of the important spiritual books in his life. He brings up Michael of Nebadon in a prayer at the beginning of a documentary about him, which is just like the most beautiful documentary. And he
Wow.
was so the police, he would be at like peace protests and things, and the police would beat him so badly that he had to get spinal surgery.
Oh my
And then
God.
he goes, and he goes straight away and is protesting again. And then the police officer tells him like, "Run," because everybody starts running away. And then he says, "I can't run. I just had spinal surgery." And he points to where it is. And then the police officer clubs him exactly where he just had spinal surgery. So they talk about that. They would, his wife was kind of his protector because
Mhm.
he wasn't maybe careful, he wasn't very careful about danger in these situations and things. But so they would actually carry him in a full body cast to the front lines of the protests. And then he was in so much pain from all these back injuries. And then he was working, and he said always a way to distract himself from the pain. He was kind of the Patch Adams. He was friends with Patch Adams, and he was in Berkeley, California, playing a clown at hospitals with children with cancer and things like this, and to cheer them up and kind of forget about his pain. And then he noticed that when he was dressed as a clown and he didn't have time to take off his clown outfit and he went to a protest, the police didn't want to beat up a clown. So then he became, that was like the reason he became a clown, because cops don't want to get like photographed clubbing a clown. But he's just such a beautiful person. And and it's like it can be left up to the imagination, how much, how deeply he's studied the book, but it's
Sure.
clearly been something that it's been a part of his life throughout his life. And that, with the hog farm, they would read spiritual texts. And so they would read sometimes in the morning readings or in the sunset readings, read from the Urantia book together. So you can imagine, and a lot of the people he knew, who he was friends with, were also readers. So it's hard to know. I mean, so many,
Yeah.
it's always really interesting to see how there's so many connections, and one of them is also that the more you learn about him, you just have to love the guy. It's like everybody, I mean, of course, Grateful Dead fans love Jerry Garcia,
Oh yeah.
but
And
but
they called the Urantia book Jerry's Bible. All of
yeah,
his
that's
friends.
amazing. I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, so when he started Seva, he tells the story that they decided they were going to try to get the Grateful Dead, and then just coincidentally, they were on the airplane he was on when he was flying out of there from that meeting. And he asked Jerry, and he said, "Oh, Jerry always says yes." So they were like one of the first bands who really helped them get all this humanitarian work off the ground. But
Wow.
yeah, I mean, someone like Jerry Garcia, of course, there's so many layers of potential for, seekers and people who are so inspired by Jerry to know. I mean, just like the idea, well, where did Jerry envision in terms of his afterlife? I mean, maybe he was comforted a lot from reading the Urantia. And in fact, that's what I've been told, is that he read the Urantia book a lot in the months before he died. And, or, you know,
More good news. There is
many of these others, right? Jimi Hendrix. But
right.
in the case of someone like Jerry Garcia, it's just, I remember being at this, um, there's a nude beach on Maui that's always kind of like a little festival on Sundays, and my mom likes to go there. It's kind of like, the 60s are still alive in some places, like on Maui, and there's this group of like young hippies, and they're like, "What do you think Jerry would say about that?" Like it's like he's Jesus to them or something. I don't know, but
Well,
it's
he was a musical minister. Think about that.
yeah,
I mean, there's people that did nothing but follow his group from
yeah,
town to town. I mean, because they loved his music so much. His music
yeah,
moved them. And it's because he was moved, right? He was moved in his heart and soul. And the Arrange Book has a way of doing that for people.
yeah,
That's the point. That when it
yeah,
comes out in their music, that, or like you said about Wavy Gravy, the beautiful things they do, the way they serve humanity. You read that book and you feel compelled to have
Mhm.
a relationship with God, to treat men and women like your brothers and sisters. You just know that they are. Nothing makes you believe that more than the Urantia book,
Mhm.
and nothing makes you want to serve humanity more than the Urantia book. So, at least not in my experience, it
Mhm.
brings us together as brothers and sisters. We may fall short, but we honestly want to, be kind and loving and good the way we know God is,
Mhm.
because we've been introduced to this God and to
Yeah.
Jesus, his ambassador, the ultimate ambassador from the other side, right? So, yeah, Jerry Garcia is an amazing example of a Urantia book reader, and it comes out in his music, and Willie Nelson is another one. How much you were saying earlier, how he bridged the gap between hippies and rednecks, I guess, or
Yeah.
cowboys, what we used to
Yeah.
call.
Well, that's an interesting thing about, that a bunch of the musicians that I've researched have talked about, or it's come up that they were particularly interested in this line about that someday a musician could change the course of a nation. To paraphrase, someday a real musician may appear in Urantia, and whole peoples will be enthralled by their magnificent strains and his melodies. One such human being could forever change the course of a whole nation, even the entire civilized world. And yeah, so Willie Nelson, when Willie Nelson was given the Urantia book, the musician who gave it to him told him, "I think you're the guy who they're talking about, who's going to change the world, who is changing the world for the better." And if you think about it, well, so many musicians of that generation. I mean, you look at something like Woodstock, and you look at all the peace anti-war movement, and the civil rights and everything. That music played an important role. So maybe it wasn't like one person changed the course of a nation, but that is kind of prophetic of the counterculture, I would say. And
Yeah,
someone like him, yeah, that he, if you look deeper into his influence, that he really was. You take Merle Haggard, who was more like saying, "Oh, those darn peace protesters, and we rednecks, we don't like them, and you
right.
can, we don't
Those
want to have
long
anything to do
hairs.
with you." And he was actually good friends with Willie Nelson,
Right.
and Willie Nelson actually converted him later on to being like pro hippie or whatever, just getting over his prejudices
Lighten
and
up,
everything.
right?
Yeah, yeah, it was a bit of a stance he took, maybe for various reasons, that he struck a nerve, and it
Right.
increased his popularity and everything. But Willie was the opposite. That he, traditionally it was like, yeah, there was the hippies, and there were different categories. I mean, it was the same with maybe, like when Jimi Hendrix played in Harlem. It was like there weren't any. He was like a hippie star,
Uh-huh.
when he played in Harlem, people were like, "Oh, we don't like this music," because it wasn't something they were accustomed to.
Right.
And yeah, there's been there was a real rift between like the counterculture and the more country music listening, redneck, and that
Mhm.
he played a really important role. They say, and because he was so out, where having his braids and being, and
He was a long hair.
yeah, and he knew, he was friends with everybody. I mean, or
Mhm.
he's one of those people. Everybody
But
loves
he's
him.
beloved.
Yeah,
Everybody loves him.
yeah.
Yeah,
Jimmy Carter was a huge fan of his, and
right.
would have him come and stay at the White House. I think it was like Jimmy had so much stress about the state of the world, so he'd listen to it would help him to relax and cheer up when
Right.
he'd listen to Willie Nelson, and he'd have Willie Nelson come and stay with him at the White House. And Willie wrote later in one of his biographies that he would go smoke a joint on the roof, and the Secret Service would watch him. And but of course they're like, "Well, you're friends with the president. Who knows? You're friends with the
Yeah,
president. You're Willie
you're not
Nelson.
gonna
Like,
say
what are we
no.
going to do?" But yeah, so I mean, who knows? I mean, a lot of people wonder, and I mean, in a lot of cases, maybe it's not. You don't really need to know, but we know that when you look at the research I've been doing, you can really see that it's
There's a
just
pattern.
it's really circulated in so many spheres. So it's pretty much guaranteed that Jimmy Carter was given the Urantia book. In fact, I know a reader who sent him one in that, when he was president. But
Mhm.
that was also at a time when Willie Nelson was reportedly giving away Urantia books, and he was good friends. And it seems like Jimmy Carter might have been the kind of person, but of course we don't always maybe have to know, especially when it comes to presidents, because they're so,
Right. Or
the politics is so polarized. So,
right.
maybe I wouldn't want to have proof that George Bush was a Urantia book reader or whatever, even though, there are stories that, well, there was someone I think it was a cousin or something that, someone who was really close. Well, there are a lot of who that he was hanging out with the Urantia Book for some time when in his drinking days, apparently, or from
I know one of his
seems
very
that
good
way.
friends who is a dyed-in-the-wool reader. So
Sorry.
I know one of Bush's very good friends who is a dyed-in-the-wool reader. So it would
Uh-huh.
make sense to me that,
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Um,
possible. I
yeah.
think it's permeated the culture more than anybody will ever know, and
Yeah.
someday it will come to the surface, and people will be willing to admit readily, yeah, I read that book, and that book is beautiful and good, and it's nothing to be afraid of, and I
Yeah.
think anybody could be benefited by reading it.
Yeah. And different readers have different stances or opinions about, if things have been moving too slowly or too quickly. And I wouldn't be surprised if the angels of the churches and the angels of progress don't agree on this issue. I mean, you can always move more quickly or more slowly, and um and but
Yeah.
it's really kind of encouraging to see that um it's not, it's like in a way it's kind of a unintentional secret, but in a way it really has, but then you can also think, well, these people, what's different about them is that they were interested, because you can I could go introduce it to 100 of my teacher colleagues and maybe one would read it, but
Right.
then if in country music you go around and you introduce it to 100 country music musicians, and like 50 of them become, what I mean, like a huge percentage of them become readers. So I think that there's well, it's when people, a good thing about this research is that partly you have the academic aspect and all that, but it adds that sense, like kind of like you talked about in that video, that when people see that, well, why are all these people interested in it? It makes it seem more interesting, and it makes it like, well, these
Right.
people, they're not stupid. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe if just one of them was on a lot of drugs or whatever, but I mean, when you look at the whole, there's a lot of people who are like leaders in this, personal development, gurus, and all kinds of people that have so much respect. So
Absolutely.
it really, it provides a halo effect to help protect against this, like, oh, it's just a crazy cult. It's like, well, all these people obviously weren't crazy, or and they weren't prejudiced, or they weren't this or that people might want to ascribe to the Ranch Book readers. They weren't in a cult.
Truth is, it's a book. It's just a book, but it is just the most amazing book, and truly transformational and life changing. And authors like Stephen Covey and Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer openly admitted he read it, that it was influential in his life. And many readers who have read Wayne Dyer, Urantia Book readers, say, "Oh, I see the influence there." And it's almost unmistakable when you read an author and they start talking about certain concepts. You go, wow, that's a Urantia Book concept. It's almost unmistakable. Whereas musicians, it's not so obvious
Mhm.
necessarily, unless like Spirit, the group Spirit had a song
Mhm.
called Urantia,
Mhm.
unless they make it real obvious, it's not necessarily that obvious. But
Yeah, it's been interesting though that, like, a lot of times when readers, you would assume that, well, that's just wishful thinking, that, well, of course people are going to wishfully think that this musician or that musician that they love would be a Ranch Book reader. But it's very often been the case that I'm suspecting someone might be, or they're kind of on my list of possibility. And then, like in the case of Carlos Santana, then suddenly they just come out and start,
talk
quoting the Ranch Book on Facebook and things like that. And you're like, oh yeah, so that's happened so many times that it's like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't kind of have that bias to assume that, well, it's just wishful thinking. I mean, because it's clearly, it's happened quite a few times that it's been confirmed later on.
right.
I've heard the rumor, and then I found confirmation.
Was it the remarkable artist Robert Venosa who turned Carlos Santana onto the book? Do you know who was responsible? Because I know Venosa did his album cover for
Yeah,
Abraxas, and I always have made that connection. I wondered if it was
yeah,
Bob Venosa who turned him on to the book.
yeah. I don't even know. Yeah, I don't. I'm pretty sure that he didn't, because I don't think they were friends in the early '70s. And Carlos says that
He's had it since then.
he says it's been an important, one of the few books that's like been an important part of his spiritual life
The early
since the
70s.
'70s, in the Haight Ashbury scene. He says
Oh,
in the Bay Area, hip music scene, or counterculture scene, that everybody was reading Urantia Book. And, uh, Jerry Garcia's, the mother of his children, Mountain Girl, she's also said the same thing. Well, everybody was reading the Urantia book, all the, cool people in their circles. So yeah, it's hard to know. Maybe in his circles, there was a time when it was impossible not to be introduced to it. But then that it's one thing to be introduced, as we know, living in this world, you can go and introduce people. Most people aren't going to go and read it, but that's kind of what's pretty remarkable too, is that not only was it spreading around, but people were really, reading it. So many, particularly these very, like if you look at the list of, what Rolling Stone would say are the best guitarists of all time, of course, Carlos is on that list, and
Jimmy,
with a huge amount of talent.
Right. Bob Dylan, you recently found a good rumor that Bob Dylan, or I would say a reliable source told you that Bob Dylan was heavily influenced by it. And you hear it in his music too. It's really interesting. I mean, once you know that, then you listen again, you hear it in the music.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I kind of, it's hard to tell, but I'm under the impression that maybe he was quite born again Christian for quite a long time, and then maybe he got more liberal after a while and opened up, because it's pretty clear in the books about him and everything, or he was quite publicly. So it's hard to know when he got into it. But yeah, I met someone in the music industry who studied the book with someone who was his guitar player, and said that he was studying the book because Bob had told him to, because he wanted to be able to discuss it with him. It was pretty yeah. And it's a bit that's one of those ones where it's kind of like the person who told me, I've got to talk to him with him more about it. I hope he doesn't mind this, but yeah, it's
That's cool. Let me ask.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where it's like, you can't get more iconic,
You can't.
And Elvis too, I mean, Elvis, and that same songwriter who told me the story about, he's in Nashville. There's so many people in Nashville who were like,
it went through there like wildfire, didn't it?
Yeah. And he said that, he had heard the stories. That it's kind of like, some people say Elvis was into the book, and others say, well, it was just one of the books that he, on his kind of long list. But that same person who told me about Bob Dylan, he also, he in several cases, talked to people who actually said that in one of the cases, it was somebody who said that he was there, that after they would rehearse, they would sit and have like a Urantia Book study group, like Elvis would be like, yeah, we're going to read the Urantia Book now, like it's almost like, oh, it's hard to believe, because it's almost like that's the kind of thing that would just be wishful thinking, but on the other hand, biographers who know nothing about the Urantia Book, it's brought up in their biographies and things. So it's not just a unfounded rumor. And I talked to the guy who introduced it to him, actually. And he wrote a biography about it and everything. And he was giving, he was his personal hairdresser, and would give him spiritual books. And he had also read the Urantia Book, and wanted Elvis to get into it. It's like, and here, so like I was thinking, so here I was like a kid, and I have family in Tennessee. I mean, this is just one of those examples of like the juxtaposition. And you're like, we would go to Memphis every summer, and sometimes we'd look up readers. There's like a few readers, but you'd basically assume that, well, there's just a few readers in Tennessee, but lo and behold, like the most famous person in the world who's from that same city is reading the Urantia Book, you know what I mean? And you had no idea. And like just a couple hours away, like there's this, there's a study group in Nashville where like so many people who are so influential in the music scene and stars and so forth are reading the Urantia Book together. And someone like Willie Nelson, it's just, and if you compare with, you say like something that, oh, everybody knows what the Book of Mormon, people read the Book of Mormon, like how many, maybe a lot of people of course read the Book of Mormon, but it's they've got like churches all over the world, the Urantia community, we have like one building, you know what I mean? Like for like a long time, sometimes two, like just a few paid employees,
Right.
in the whole world. Like that's something that when I kind of in my academic research, when I talk about like the sort of the sociological analysis, or if you compare with other movements, there's a lot that seems that's quite different with the Urantia movement, and that it's
Mhm.
so extremely decentralized. Yet it's still really people who are very influential, clearly, which is quite amazing from this research. But it's really hard to find a place where you have like 100 readers living within a 1 hour drive of each other, at least who are in contact with each other.
Right.
Maybe Los Angeles, but it's been so extremely decentralized and spread out and small in terms of in one sense, yet also yeah, it's a cool thing. And another thing that's quite unique about the Urantia movement, from what I've seen, is that movements spread because people spread them,
Mm.
and you socialize someone
Right.
into it, or you raise your kid to be a Mormon or whatever, right?
Right.
Or you befriend people, and then you're like, oh, look at now I'm part of this amazing, loving group of people. Or like the Scientologists, they called it love bombing. Or you'd like admiration bomb people, and you could of course you get all this admiration, and then you're like, oh, I want to. These people make me feel so good. Of course that happens sometimes in the Urantia movement, but to a great extent, it's like it's spreading in spite of the movement. It's like the fraction of the spreading because somebody brings a friend to a conference and then they become a reader. I mean, that happens too, but a lot of the time it's the book itself that's the driving
Right.
force. People
Right.
finding the book. And it's actually, I mean, it's a little, you know, sometimes I won't focus on that in my life now because it's not, but it can be a bit disappointing that, back in back in the 90s when I was going to conferences and I was like, there's all these people in my parents' generation, and I love these people and they're so inspiring and they're so devoted. And I would have hoped that now, there would be maybe 1,000 second generation readers. I mean, there's 1,000 people in the United States, probably, several thousand who were raised by Urantia Book readers, but most of them are, not on the radar. But a few of them, then if you look at, look at Sue, and Jeff, and Derek, and Chris Wood, people who are leading the organizations. Those
Right.
the very very few who are second generation, Angie Thurston, who are involved are like pulling a lot of disproportionate amount of weight. There aren't a lot of, but there aren't a lot of there's a small number of active people of my generation who are second, or people who are younger than the baby boomers who are very active, who are second generation. But then there's also like a real surprising, or I don't know. I mean, I won't get too negative about it, but you go to Urantia Book conferences, there aren't a lot of new people showing up in general. There aren't a lot of new, of any age really, but it's such a beautiful thing that your generation has had this wonderful, you had a conference in Colorado with 1,000, I mean, it's a shame about the politics that kind of divide, that of course had to cast a
Yeah, they
shadow
always
on
do.
the beauty of it, but it's still, I mean, nobody got killed. You know what I mean?
Right. We
you
didn't
know,
call in the Hells Angels, right?
yeah. I mean, but that kind of thing does happen
Yeah.
sometimes. But I mean, and it's, well,
Part
a
of the
really
human
good thing about that, I think, is that it's gone in the right direction. It's gone in the direction of conciliation, in a
Of course.
conciliatory,
Yeah.
cooperative, loving direction. And so that's really encouraging. And but
That's who
it's,
we are.
I'm so glad that I've been able to be a part of, but I wish, in a way, I wish I had been born, a little younger and could have gone to those conferences where there were, a million or 1,000 people and John Denver played, and,
Yeah. It was a love fest. It was just a love fest. And it still is, it's family. We go to conferences a lot, and the people who manage those conferences say, "Are you guys a family, or is this a family reunion?" And well, yeah, it is, because we've been baptized by the knowledge that we are family, and
Mhm.
we believe that with all our hearts.
Mhm.
And I know we could go on and on and on, Mike, you and I especially, because we've heard so much. You have researched it, and I've just kept my ear to the ground. And I love telling you, I love giving you new clues. I think, dang, there's got to be something else I could tell Michael about that. But I can't wait for your book to come out. It's going to be wonderful. And I want to encourage everybody to go to your GoFundMe page and donate to it so that, yes, you are a grant recipient and you did get some money, but that's just an initial little seed money. We really need to push to get this book out because it's very important. It's a scholarly work, and you've devoted so much of your life to it, and you've done such a beautiful job. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks,
And
Paula.
yeah, really appreciate all you've done. And, who you are, really appreciate who you are. You're just a good person. I can tell by everything you do. You're a great dad. You're a great friend. I know that experientially. And I love you, man.
I love
Thank
you too.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being who you are, and giving this your all. Because that's what it takes. It takes us all, that's like the quote, if we all live together at the same time, we can lift a heavy weight. And that's what we need to do. We need to lift together and support each other. And I really support you in this effort. Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes it's we're surrounded by a society that has other priorities, and so it's constantly trying to distract you into its priorities, and so like having this project that like basically nobody around me would just judge or whatever, wouldn't understand. It makes it like, yeah, it's really good that I've stayed connected with the Urantia community, because otherwise I think it's hard to have like that momentum to like, okay, I'm gonna take time off work and just focus on this, and I'm gonna really go, not just kind of be allow myself to just get in the comfort zone of going along with what the expectations of society are, and so it's I'm really thankful for yourself and other readers who have inspired me so much over the years, and it was always that way, that I'd go to Urantia conference and I'd be like, I get so much of that energy, to like, okay, now I have to like contribute, I have to do something positive, I have to use this energy in a positive way and not just kind of get stuck in some distraction or less important priorities. So thanks so much.
I love your professor, man. Give that guy a hug and tell him for me, thank you for talking you into doing this, because
yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that it was actually I actually said no several times to doing this, because I had no idea or I knew that it was just going to consume me.
Yeah, and it did.
It's kind of cool that he kind of made me do it, and it's cool that he's in the video. He the video that's on the GoFundMe. He
watch that video, everyone.
To be in a Zoom, to do a Zoom interview, and and you're in it, and a couple other young readers.
Derek is in it, and David Fabe. It's a good
video. Derek filmed part of it. He actually filmed the Colorado footage, but he's not actually in it. But David Fabe and a new reader, a neighbor of mine, Daniel. Yeah, he went to a conference in Estonia a couple summers ago, and he was just blown away. And he's really it's really changing his life. Wow. It's really inspiring to see that he was going through a lot, and it's really been a part of that.
Yeah, it changes people.
Really sincere young man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and in his case, well, he talks about it in the video, so I shouldn't maybe paraphrase it now, but it's really interesting that when I tell people about this research, that they're even maybe people, I mean, in his case, it's like, well, these musicians have meant so much to him, so that really was just like, I got to learn more about this. But even sometimes, I talked to somebody who I just said, hey, sometimes I could use some help, and I'm kind of keeping my eye out for somebody who has like time, might be interested. And I knew this guy who was just a sweet guy, and I just had this hunch, and I told him about it, and he was like, I'd love to help you. And now he's studying at Stockholm University, and that's what tends to happen, is people are too busy with all their other things. But he was like, man, I gotta, this book is amazing. And Hep Beving, he was so amazed by his music, just that one musician, and the fact that, Hep had, I had discovered him through all this, he was so fascinated by the whole thing, and it's amazing. It's like this kind of, it's like unraveling this secret, that this thing, it's so interesting. Of course, the Urantia book is so amazing and interesting of itself. And then it's also kind of done what an amazing thing should do, which is be read by amazing people.
That's the fruits of that beautiful revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the fruits. And like I said, we could go on all day because I know, and it would be fun because we have so much. I mean, while we're talking, dozens of people are coming to my mind that we've already talked
Mm.
about. But
Yeah,
it's
it's
just a precursor for the book. You
as
got
you
to
can
get
see,
the book.
it's dark here in Sweden. It's 6 p.m. It's going to the days are going to get really short here soon because we have very short days in the fall and winter. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
I'll
It's
get home,
evening there.
put my
It's
kids to
light
bed.
here.
Yeah, it's morning there, and
Yeah, it's morning
I'm
here.
in my office at my high school, which I've been not telling them that I'm actually working on because I'm working part time as a teacher, but I'll often be here because I can focus well, and
Yeah.
I, I think some of the colleagues in my office. Well, I told actually one of them, the one who said hello earlier, and she's also like, oh, this is really great. Like she read what I wrote on my GoFundMe page, and she's like, yeah, this is really cool. Like she's very interested. She's Finnish. The Finnish something about the Finnish people. They tend to be pro. Or, they
There's
have one of the highest percentages of readers, at least in Europe.
Oh,
Maybe not
wow.
compared to
Okay.
Brazil or something, but.
Oh,
Um,
that's amazing.
but yeah, I imagine we had thought maybe a half hour, and now we've been talking for an hour. So I imagine we need to say goodbye.
Well, yeah, and I know you have 3 beautiful little daughters at home and a lovely wife, and you probably wanna get home to your family, and thank you so much for giving your time to us today and tonight in your case, and, we will look forward to your book coming out, and, I'm gonna go make a donation on your page.
Thanks so much, Paula. Love you.
Love you, man.
Thanks
Take
so much.
care. God
Thank
bless.
you.